Many years ago, in the vibrant village of Adu, nestled deep within a sun-scorched land where the heat seemed to bear a personal grudge against its people, there lived a man named Chike. He was a calm, kind soul and by all accounts, a successful man. Yet, if you weren't paying close attention, you might pass him by in a bustling crowd without a second glance. Not because he was invisible but because he was small in stature. Chike, though in his 30s, could easily be mistaken for a boy of 18. His youthful face and slight, teenage frame made him stand out, or rather blend in, among the towering figures of his peers. From childhood, Chike had always been the smallest. His friends, with their booming voices and broad shoulders, would tease him relentlessly, calling him Kweku, a name borrowed from the tiny, chattering sparrow that flitted about the village. They'd laugh as they towered over him, their shadows swallowing his own. "Kweku, little bird, fly away before the wind carries you off," they'd jest. But those who dared to underestimate him soon learned their mistake. What Chike lacked in size he more than made up for in wisdom. His words carried weight, his mind sharp as a blade honed by years of quiet observation. Over time, the village came to respect him, not for his height but for the depth of his insight. Whether it was settling disputes over farmland or advising a troubled elder, Chike always had the right words, delivered with a gentle firmness that commanded attention. Yet, for all his wisdom, there was one choice of his that left the village utterly baffled. His betrothed Nneka. Where Chike was small and unassuming, Nneka was the opposite in every way. She was not just large, she was a towering force of nature. When she stood among men, you'd think she led a band of warriors. Her voice boomed like thunder, her presence parted crowds like a river carving through stone, and when she walked, even the dust seemed to scatter in deference. The day Chike introduced her as his wife-to-be, the village erupted in whispers that spread faster than a wildfire in dry grass. "Have you seen her?" Mama Ngozi, a wiry woman who sold smoked fish at the market, muttered to her friend as they watched Nneka stride past. "That woman is built like a baobab tree. I pity Chike. Does she lift him with one hand to dust the roof?" The women stifled their laughter, but the gossip didn't stop there. "How will he survive her?" Another voice chimed in, a young seamstress named Ada, her eyes wide with disbelief. "They say love is blind, but this time it must be deaf and foolish too." The day Chike brought Nneka to meet his closest companions was one. Chike stood proudly beside her, his chest puffed out as though he'd won a great prize. "My brothers, this is Nneka, my wife, my queen," he declared, his voice steady despite the stunned silence that followed. Obi, his lanky friend with a quick tongue, coughed to mask a laugh. "Chike, are you marrying a wife or a warrior? Does she guard you from the goats at night?" The group burst into laughter, their cackles echoing through the compound. But Chike remained unshaken. He gazed at Nneka with a tenderness that silenced their mockery, if only for a moment. "Love doesn't measure height, my friends," he said softly. "It measures the heart." The villagers laughed and whispered behind their hands, but Chike paid them no mind. Their marriage began as sweetly as ripe mangoes in season. For the first few months, life was a gentle rhythm of shared meals and quiet evenings. Nneka treated Chike with a respect that surprised those who'd predicted doom. She never belittled him, never made him feel small despite their stark differences. Chike, in turn, was convinced he'd chosen well, a woman strong enough to stand beside him, a partner in every sense. But then, like a storm creeping over the horizon, things began to change. It started subtly, so quietly Chike barely noticed at first. Nneka's pet name for him, "my king," faded from her lips. In its place came a new one, "little man," spat with a sharpness that stung. Where she once served him meals with care, she now slammed plates onto the table with a clang that made him flinch. One evening, Chike returned home, weary from a long day tending the fields, the warm scent of yam stew wafting from the kitchen. He smiled, settling at the table to wait. But when Nneka emerged, she plopped down with her own plate and began eating alone. Chike blinked, confusion creasing his brow. "Nneka, where's my food?" Without looking up, she jerked her chin toward the kitchen. "Go serve yourself." He froze, the words sinking in like a stone. He'd never seen this side of her, cold, dismissive. Swallowing his pride, he rose and fetched his meal, telling himself it was just a bad day. Surely tomorrow would be different. But tomorrow was worse. Nneka's tone grew sharper, her gaze colder. When he spoke, she'd sneer or roll her eyes as if his voice were a buzzing fly she longed to swat. Chike clung to hope, whispering to himself that marriage had its seasons, that this was merely a passing cloud. He didn't yet see the tempest brewing. One Saturday morning, Chike rose early as was his habit and brewed a pot of tea. He set it on the table with a smile, waiting for Nneka to join him. When she finally shuffled out, yawning and stretching her massive frame, she glanced at the steaming cup and frowned. "What's this?" "Tea, my love," Chike replied, his voice warm. She snatched the cup, took a sip, then spat it out with a grimace. "Ugh! What nonsense is this?" Before he could respond, she hurled the cup across the room, shattering it against the wall. "Do I drink tea like a beggar now? Where's the milk? Where's the sugar?" Chike stared, bewildered. "But, my love, this is how I always make it." A sharp crack cut him off as her hand met his cheek. The room fell silent, save for the ringing in his ears. He touched his burning face, stunned. Why did you hit me?" "Because you waste my time with your useless excuses." Nneka snapped, towering over him. "I'm your wife, not some child you can serve rubbish to. Make it properly next time." She grabbed her phone and stormed out, leaving Chike alone, rubbing his cheek in disbelief. At first, her temper was a flicker, an annoyance he could endure. But soon, it roared into an inferno. She no longer needed a reason to lash out. A wrong greeting earned him a slap. A cough too loud brought a kick. A bad day for her meant punches raining down on him like a monsoon. And the worst part? The neighbors began to notice. One evening, Chike trudged home from work, bone-tired and craving peace. Nneka lounged on the couch, scrolling through her phone. As he stepped inside, her eyes flicked up, narrowing. "Where've you been?" "Work, my love," he sighed, forcing a smile. She scoffed. "Work? What work? That little job you drag yourself to every day? I don't even know why they keep you. Maybe they pity small people like you." He ignored the barb and shuffled to the table. "Have you eaten?" "Of course I have. Do I look like I wait for you to feed me?" "What about me? Did you cook anything?" She rolled her eyes. "Am I your mother? Must I cook for you every day? Go eat outside if you're so hungry." Chike bit back a retort, found some stale leftovers in the kitchen and sat to eat. 2 bites in, a sharp thwack struck the back of his head. Pain flared as he turned to see Nneka wielding a wooden spoon. "You useless man. Why are you chewing so loudly?" "Nneka, you hit me because I was eating?" he asked, voice trembling. "Yes, and if you keep making noise I'll dump that food on your head," she barked. He lowered his gaze and ate in silence, knowing better than to argue. The village had seen it all now. Chike's suffering was no longer a secret. And it was only the beginning. The days bled into weeks, and Chike's life in the village of Adu became a shadow of what it once was. The man who had once been admired for his quiet wisdom now moved through the world like a ghost, his spirit dimmed by the storm that raged within his own home. Nneka's temper had grown wilder, a beast unchained, and Chike bore the brunt of it in silence. The neighbors, once content to whisper behind their mud walls, could no longer pretend ignorance. The sounds of slaps, kicks, and shouted insults spilled from Chike's compound like water from a cracked pot, and the village watched with a mix of pity and amusement. One night, after a long day in the fields, Chike stepped into the bedroom, still drying his hair from a bath. He hadn't noticed Nneka standing there, arms crossed, her glare sharp enough to cut through stone. "You used my towel, didn't you?" she accused, her voice low and dangerous. Chike blinked, glancing at the cloth in his hands, a soft pink one he'd grabbed in his exhaustion. "Which towel?" "The pink one. The one I told you never to touch," she roared. He realized his mistake too late. "My love, I didn't mean." Her hand cracked across his face before he could finish. He stumbled back, ears ringing. "Nneka, why?" Another slap silenced him. "Because you're a disrespectful fool," she bellowed. "You think you can use my things and talk back to me?" A third blow sent him reeling, and this time the sound carried beyond their walls. Mama Ezin, the elderly widow next door, nudged her husband awake. "Kai, it's happening again. That woman is fighting World War III in there." Chike raised his hands in surrender. "I'm sorry, I won't do it again." But Nneka's fury only swelled. "Oh, now you argue because you're a man, eh?" Another stinging slap landed, and Chike retreated to a corner, defeated. That night, he slept on the floor, hungry and bruised, his mind a tangle of frustration and despair. The next morning, as he hurried to work, Mama Ezin caught him outside. "Chike, my son, come here." Her voice was soft but firm, her eyes scanning his swollen cheek. He forced a smile. "Good morning, Mama." She glanced around, then leaned closer. "My son, is it true? Does Nneka beat you?" Chike stiffened. "Who told you that?" "We hear everything," she said, shaking her head. "Last night she called you a goat and worse. We heard the slaps." "Chike, this isn't right." "It's just small misunderstandings," he mumbled, covering his face. Mama Ezen's hands flew to her hips. Misunderstandings? If a misunderstanding leaves you with a black eye, it's no longer small. Look at you, your face is puffed like bread in an oven. He chuckled nervously. I can handle it, Mama. Thank you. She sighed, unconvinced. Just don't die in that house, my son. The village market became the next stage for Chike's humiliation. One Saturday he and Nneka went to buy vegetables as they often did. She strode ahead, her towering figure cutting through the crowd, while Chike trailed behind like a porter burdened with her bags. At the tomato stand, Nneka pointed imperiously. How much for these? 2,000 naira per basket, the seller replied. Nneka turned to Chike, her tone dripping with arrogance. Where's the money? He blinked. Which money? Her eyes flared. Did you not hear me? Where's the money? But, my love, I thought you had it. Her hand flew faster than he could dodge, striking his cheek with a loud crack. The market froze. A child tugged at his mother's wrapper. Mama, why is that big woman beating her little boy? The tomato seller gaped and a butcher across the aisle laughed. This man is finished, she's turned him into her handbag. Chike's ears rang as he touched his burning face. The crowd watched, waiting for him to react, but he only stood there, silent. Nneka wasn't done. She grabbed his collar and shook him like a rag doll. Give me money now, you useless man. I left my wallet at home, he stammered. She sighed dramatically, turning to the seller. Sorry, my little boy forgot the money. The market erupted in laughter, and Chike wished the earth would swallow him whole. Her little boy, she'd said, and the words branded him. By now, Chike's suffering was the village's favorite tale. The men in the compound, Obi, Tund, and the boisterous Kasim, had seen and heard it all. They'd winced at the slaps, chuckled at the insults, but instead of offering help, they turned it into sport. One evening, as Chike trudged home with a small sack of yams, Kasim's voice boomed across the yard. Chike, my brother, come here. Chike hesitated. I'm tired, Kasim. Tomorrow maybe? No, come now. Tund waved him over. Let's talk as men. Sighing, Chike approached. The men lounged outside, chewing roasted maize, their laughter already bubbling up. Kasim grinned. My friend, how was today's beating? The group roared. Chike forced a smile. You people like to joke too much. An older man, Baba Yemi, wiped tears from his eyes. But seriously, my son, you can't continue like this. Every night, boom bang. Your house sounds like a wrestling pit. Tund, tall and muscled, shook his head. Chike, tell me, did you marry a woman or a prize fighter? Brothers, Nneka is my wife, Chike said quietly. She has a temper, yes, but she'll change. Kasim raised an eyebrow. Chains? Are you waiting for the gods to rewrite her heart? More laughter. Baba Yemi leaned forward. Listen, my son. A woman like that doesn't hear words. You must show her who's the head of the house. One slap, that's all she needs to respect you. Tund punched his palm. If she were my wife, she'd have learned discipline from day one. Chike listened, then shook his head. No, I can't do that. Kasim frowned. What, you're afraid of her? No, Chike said, rubbing his forehead. I'm not afraid of her. I'm afraid for her. The men stared, puzzled. What do you mean? If I ever raised my hand against her, she might not survive it, Chike said softly. She thinks I'm weak because I don't fight back, but I know my strength. I believe she'll change. I'll be patient. The silence stretched, then shattered as the men burst into hysterics. Listen to this man. Kasim wheezed. You, the one beaten daily like a drum, could finish her? Chike, stop pretending, we know you're scared. Chike stood. Good night, my friends. He walked away, their laughter trailing him like a mocking shadow. Days later, after another brutal night, Nneka had kicked him for coughing too loudly. Chike went to work, his face still tender from her latest slap. He returned that evening to find the men waiting, but this time they didn't jest. Kasim shook his head dramatically. Brothers, a moment of silence for our fallen warrior. They bowed their heads, feigning mourning. Tund sighed. We've lost a brave man. Baba Yemi wiped fake tears. Chike, you're the first husband in history to become a housewife. The laughter echoed as Chike slipped inside, his heart heavy. He wondered how long he could endure this. Would Nneka ever soften? One night, after she'd pummeled him for breathing too loudly while she watched TV, Chike sat on the floor, clutching his ribs. Why are you like this, Nneka? He asked, voice breaking. Do you even love me? She scoffed. Love? Do you deserve love, you little rat? Her words pierced deeper than her blows. He went to bed silently, accepting his fate, until the day it all unraveled. At work, where Chike supervised a small crew, he'd once been respected. But that illusion crumbled one afternoon when he gave an order to K'd, a brash young worker. K'd, file these reports by day's end. K'd leaned back, smirking. File them yourself. Chike blinked. Excuse me? K'd stood, arms crossed. You come here commanding us, eh? When you can't even control your own house. The other workers paused, ears perked. Everyone knows your wife beats you like a child. You're only a man here, back home you're a rat. Laughter erupted across the room. Chike's face burned with shame. He turned and walked away, saying nothing, but the damage was done. Even his authority at work had crumbled. That evening he trudged home, drenched in humiliation. Even my workers mock me, he muttered. I've become a jest. He slipped inside, hoping for quiet, but Nneka was waiting. You useless man, she shouted the moment he entered. Where have you been? Work, he sighed. Work? That pitiful job? People laugh at you in this village, do you know that? Are you even a man? Please Nneka, not today. Her slap cut him off, followed by a punch to his chest. She grabbed his collar, shaking him. I'm talking to you, you rat. Chike closed his eyes and then, something snapped. His hand moved before he could stop it, striking her cheek with a force he hadn't known he possessed. Nneka's eyes widened. Her legs buckled and she crumpled to the floor. Chike's heart stopped. Nneka? She didn't move. He knelt, shaking her. Nneka, wake up. I didn't mean. She lay still and panic seized him. Oh no, I'm finished. He bolted outside, shouting, Help! Somebody please? Neighbors peeked out, saw Nneka motionless and retreated, doors slamming shut. The compound fell silent. Please help me, she's not waking. Chike cried, but no one came. They told me to fight back and now they've abandoned me. With no choice, he hoisted Nneka onto his back and ran to the village healer, praying she'd live. Chike stumbled through the dusty paths of Adu, Nneka's limp weight pressing against his back as he raced toward the healer's hut. His breath came in ragged gasps, his mind a whirlwind of fear and guilt. Please let her be alive, he whispered to the night sky. God save her. The village streets, usually alive with chatter and the clatter of evening chores, were eerily quiet, as if the world itself held its breath. By the time he reached the small hospital on the outskirts, a modest building with flickering lanterns, his legs trembled beneath him. He burst through the door shouting, Help! She's not moving. The nurses rushed forward, easing Nneka from his back and onto a stretcher. Chike collapsed against the wall, chest heaving as they wheeled her into the emergency room. He sat outside, hands shaking, staring at the floor. What have I done? He muttered. I only wanted it to stop. The wait stretched into an eternity, each passing minute tightening the knot in his stomach. As he sat, lost in his thoughts, a group of young men stormed into the waiting area, their faces twisted with anger. One of them, a broad-shouldered man named Ease, pointed at Chike. That's him. Another, Jide, sneered. So, you finally killed her, eh? Chike shot to his feet, bewildered. Killed who? Nneka's not dead. Ease stepped closer, his voice dripping with scorn. You think we're fools? Everyone knows you've been beating her for months, and now you've finished her off. Chike's jaw dropped. What? I've never touched her before today. She's the one who... He stopped, realizing how absurd it sounded, a small man like him claiming a giant like Nneka had been the aggressor. It was self-defense, I swear. The men laughed bitterly. A full-grown man like you beaten by his wife? Do we look stupid? Jide raised a fist. Let's teach him a lesson. Stop, a voice thundered. Everyone turned to see Mama Ezen stride in, her presence commanding despite her slight frame. She planted herself between Chike and the men, hands on her hips. You fools. Do you even know what you're about to do? He scoffed. Mama, stay out of this. He's a murderer. Murderer? Mama Ezen glared. Are you all blind? Don't you know what's been happening in this village? Jide frowned. What do you mean? She jabbed a finger at Chike. This man has suffered for too long. Nneka beats him like a drum every day, slapping, kicking, insulting him. Where were you when she was breaking his spirit? Him? Now because he defended himself once you want to kill him? The men exchanged uneasy glances. Wait, E said, lowering his fist. You're saying Nneka was the one beating him? Mama Ezen nodded fiercely. Yes. If you lived next door you'd know. Every night, boom bang crash. And it wasn't Chike doing the hitting. Ask anyone who's heard the screams. Before they could respond, a nurse hurried out. "She's awake." Chike bolted inside, leaving the stunned men behind. Nneka lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Her eyes flicked to him, and he braced himself for a torrent of insults. But she only closed her eyes and turned her head away. No words, no rage, just silence. The next morning, Nneka was discharged. She walked beside Chike on the way home, clutching her bag, her lips sealed. He kept stealing glances, waiting for the explosion he'd grown accustomed to, but nothing came. No little man, no sharp jabs, no storm. When they reached the house, she went straight to bed without a word. Chike watched her wary. Maybe she's weak from the hospital, he thought. Tomorrow she'll be back to herself. But tomorrow brought something else entirely. Chike woke to the sound of sweeping, the soft swish of a broom against the floor. He rubbed his eyes and stepped outside to find Nneka tidying the compound, her movements deliberate and calm. Before he could speak, she looked up and smiled, a small, tentative thing. "Good morning, my husband. I've made breakfast." He froze. My husband? She hadn't called him that in months. Suspicious, he followed her inside, where a tray of steaming porridge and boiled yam awaited him. She knelt to serve it, her voice soft. "Please eat. You need your strength." Chike stared at the food, then at her. "Nneka, are you well?" She nodded humbly. "Yes, my love. Please, is it to your liking?" He poked the yam cautiously, half expecting it to be a trick. But it was perfect, warm, tender, seasoned with care. That night he couldn't sleep. He lay awake, watching her breathe peacefully beside him, waiting for the old Nneka to resurface. But she didn't. The next day she rose early again, cooked, cleaned, even polished his sandals. By evening, Chike had had enough of the mystery. He sat her down. "Nneka, we need to talk." She nodded quickly, sitting like a child awaiting instruction. "Yes, my love?" He scratched his head. "Why are you calling me my love? Where's my wife? Who are you and what have you done with Nneka?" She sighed, her eyes dropping to her hands. "It's me, Chike. I'm your wife. I know I've been terrible, cruel, disrespectful. I treated you like dirt when you deserved a crown. I thought you were weak, but I was the fool." He squinted at her. "So, you just woke up and decided to change?" She shook her head. "No. It was the day I fell. When you hit me and I lost consciousness, I had a dream. I saw myself in a dark, endless place. A voice spoke, 'If you don't change, this is where you'll end.' I woke up terrified. I realized I'd nearly destroyed my life, and the best man I could ever have." Chike leaned back, processing her words. "So, you've truly changed?" "Yes, my love," she said, eyes glistening. "I want to be the wife you deserve." He took a deep breath, then reached for her hands, a gesture he hadn't dared in months. "Nneka, I need to apologize too. Even though you hurt me, I should have spoken up sooner, found a way to stop this before it came to that. I let it fester." Tears welled in her eyes. "No, Chike, it was my fault. You were patient, kind, you never struck back even when I deserved it. You're better than I'll ever be." He smiled faintly. "Then let's start again, my love." And so they did. From that day Nneka transformed. She never raised her voice or her hand again. She served Chike with a tenderness that stunned the village. Mama Ezen nearly dropped her basket the first time she saw Nneka kneel to offer him water. "Is this the same Nneka?" she whispered to her husband. Another neighbor gaped as Nneka scrubbed Chike's clothes by the stream. Did a spirit possess her? The men in the compound were equally baffled. Kasim cornered Chike one evening. "What did you do to her, eh? She treats you like a chief now." Chike laughed. "Let's just say the gods work in mysterious ways. Peace has returned to my home." For the first time in months, Chike could sit in his own house and feel truly at ease. The storms had passed, replaced by a quiet harmony he'd almost forgotten was possible. The neighbors, once his mockers, now marveled at the change. "Mikasa Sukisa," Chike would say with a grin, "peace at last." And so, the tale of Chike and Nneka became a new kind of legend in Adu, not one of strife, but of redemption. A reminder that even the fiercest hearts can soften, and even the smallest among us can stand tall when the time is right. Thank you for listening to this folk tale. What did you think of Chike's patience? Did he handle Nneka well, or could he have done more sooner? What about those neighbors who egged him on, then fled when trouble came? Share your thoughts below, and if you enjoyed the story, give it a thumbs up, share it with your loved ones, and subscribe for more tales from the heart of the village. Until next time, stay blessed.